Hey everyone, it is February already. Can you believe it? Well, you better, because it's here. Anyway, today I'm joined by fellow podcaster Kelsey Higgins. Kelsey is the host of the Parently podcast and a mother of two. I was recently on her show as well, so definitely check out the Parently podcast. If you like this show, you'll love that one. Expect to learn how to set boundaries at work, the common struggles that parents have, why everyone wants to do a better job at parenting than their parents did, and what the consequences of that desire are. My name is Anthony Franzese. You're listening to the Successful Working Parents podcast, where we talk to working parents about how they're able to balance it all and still thrive. If you enjoy the episode, please subscribe. Anyway, on to the show. Welcome back to the Successful Working Parents podcast, the podcast where we talk to successful working parents. Title is still pending. My guest today, she is the director of client relations at a relocation company, creator and host of the Parently podcast, mother of two. Ladies and gentlemen, Kelsey Higgins. Kelsey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, Anthony. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you as well. So I was recently on your podcast and I really enjoyed it. And I'm excited to turn the tables on you and get to ask you some questions now. So
it feels weird, to be honest. I've never been on this side of a podcast, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it's more fun, but let me know at the end. But yeah, why don't you do a little quick intro on your career, if you don't mind?
Sure. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I am a client relations director in a relocation management company, an RMC, as we call it. So if you think about companies who relocate employees or send them on assignment, oftentimes that's outsourced to a provider or a partner, which is my company. And so we help develop, implement, and administer relocation and global mobility programs for companies around the world. And I am responsible for the partnership between our clients and my company. So I have a portfolio of clients that I support.
Awesome. And tell us a little bit about your role as a parent.
Oh, my role as a parent. That is an interesting question, Anthony. I know you sent me these questions ahead of time. I hadn't really thought about that. What do people usually talk about when you ask their role as a parent?
I mean, how old their kids are, and just kind of stuff, you know.
Okay, cool. So I have a 5-year-old and a boy was my firstborn, and my daughter completed our family. She will be turning 2 on December 23rd, very close to Christmas.
Yeah, really. How are you? How are you managing the gift giving?
I think it's okay right now.
She doesn't know the difference now. Yeah.
She doesn't know the difference. I've asked a lot of people what they recommend who have birthdays close to holidays and big events. And they've all said, just to make sure it's separate, make it a separate celebration, which we haven't been doing to date. We kind of combined our extended family Christmas with the birthday. But as she gets older and understands, we'll have to make sure we do that.
Yeah. My sister's birthday is December 29th.
And great. So you give me advice.
We did that. We always just also gave her like a little birthday on the 29th. So it's really more about having to think of an extra gift to get them is really the bigger challenge than anything else. But yeah, you definitely want to make it so they have a birthday.
Yeah. I don't know if it's cool or crappy to have a birthday so close to the holiday, but nothing you can do about it now.
Can't. No, they're kind of stuck with it, aren't you? All right. So you have this podcast, Parently podcast. Everybody, please check it out if you haven't already. But tell me a little bit more about the creation of that and how that came to be.
Yeah. So that started in the thoughts of it started in 2019. I had my son. It was I was on maternity leave. And that is a time that I found to be a really great time to listen to podcasts because you can't really sit down in front of a TV all day, or maybe don't want to, and you're constantly walking around and doing stuff with your kid. So I started listening to a lot of podcasts, and I particularly started listening to parenting podcasts, but I just couldn't find exactly the podcast I was looking for, not for lack of it being out there. I'm certain it was out there. There's hundreds and thousands of podcasts out there, but I just couldn't find the one that I really related to.
Yeah. Well, this one didn't exist yet, so that might be fun.
Yeah, exactly. I probably would have never had a podcast had I found yours.
Oh wow! I don't know. Let's not go that far.
uh, and so I was talking to my husband about this, and he said, "Oh, you should start a podcast." And I said, "Oh, that'd be really fun," but LOL. And for Christmas that year, he got me a microphone and a new computer and said, "Okay, you don't have any excuses. Have
Nice.
at it." So that's how it started. It started in I released my first episode in 2020. It's been 5 seasons now. I do it seasonally,
Hmm.
so 15 to 30 episodes every season, every year, weekly until my next season. So it's been a passion project slash hobby slash really great learning experience.
Yeah. So tell me about some of those learning experiences. You're interviewing parents. It's the theme is about parenting, right? Is there a certain focus that you try to have as far as certain aspect of parenting, or when you approach the conversation, what are you trying to get out of it?
I've gone through different iterations of the topics and the purpose. I really started out with a strong desire to want to interview average, everyday kind of parents, you and me, whatever Joe Schmo on the street. And the purpose was to really understand that while we all have very different experiences in parenting, there is something that connects us all, and there's a community in having this crazy wild experience. And since the first couple of seasons, I've moved a little bit away from as many normal parenting conversations, and I've had a lot more experts on the podcast who speak to very specific topics, whatever it may be. I just had somebody who was talking about distracted driving, right? So just random array of topics, and I've really, really enjoyed getting to hear experts speak on specific topics, and I've had pretty good feedback from my listeners too. But I think next season I'm going to go back to the roots a little bit and get back to the average everyday parent, because those seem to resonate better with my listeners and also really align with the whole reason why I started out.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it also makes sense when you start out. You kind of have to start with just like people who don't aren't
Yeah.
that big of a deal, right? And then you can kind of get more people with audiences as you grow.
It's interesting. My best episodes are just the random people. Sadly, normally ones that have a little bit of trauma in the
Sure.
story.
Yeah.
I think people um, like to know that they're not alone, and every parent is dealing with their own issues, whatever it may be. And so I think it's helpful to hear other people's issues and how they made it out on the other side.
Yeah. One of my most listened to episodes is just like my friend's wife who just had an interesting story and shared it around and people really liked it. So yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think you have to have like some famous person to get listens.
Right. Right.
So when you're over the years of talking to parents and talking about different topics, like is there anything that sticks out to you as far as really interesting learnings or any common themes?
Common themes. We're all just trying to do a little bit better than our parents did. I think,
Oh yeah.
and that's not saying anything against anyone's parent, but I think our the generation that is parenting now is parenting very consciously and trying to really learn from their childhood and figure out how they can apply what they've learned to their kids. I think parenting has, we've always seen in the what was it, like the 80s, there was a PSA that was like, "Hey, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your kids are?" And like, can you imagine a PSA like that now? It's just parenting has changed so much from when our parents parented. And I think society has changed a lot since then, and what kids need and what parents need. And the pressures that society put on both of those groups has changed and evolved a lot. And so what I have found in speaking with parents is they're trying to be very conscious about how they go about this, and they take parenting really seriously. It's also something that I think is a bit more of a decision and a thoughtful choice than it has been in the past. A lot of times you just got married and had kids, and that was kind of the way things went in the past. And it's becoming more common that people choose not to be parents. And so I think those people who choose to be parents are doing so and really wanting to kind of give it their all.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like our generation is thinking a lot more about it as far as, am I gonna fuck them up? Like, am I like, right? Just being intentional about how it goes. And I think our parents' generation, they all were saying they wanted to give us a life better than they had, right? And so it's almost like they were thinking more about the external, and so they like worked hard and they wanted to just provide for us, and they probably spoiled us too much, and that's a whole other whole other issue. And then now I think our generation is thinking about, I don't want to, like, how do I make them better, like internally, like give them a better life internally than I had.
That's really interesting, Anthony. I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, I just saw that just now. I mean, I think,
Wow,
yeah,
really insightful, Anthony. You are
yeah,
dropping
really.
truth bombs this
Well, you
morning.
maybe you did make me think of that, but yeah, that's interesting to think about, because I don't know if you ever heard your parents say that, but my parents would say that all the time. Like, we just want to give you guys a better life than we had, but
Mm.
they didn't really think about the better psyche than they had, right? They were thinking really more about the circumstances.
Yeah, yeah. I think it, I didn't hear that from my parents, but I think they showed it in different ways, making sure that I got to play the sports I wanted to play, or they supported me in whatever group at school I wanted to do, or it was very external focused, making sure that I should get a job young so that I learn how a good work ethic and get a paycheck and start saving for college. And you're right, it was all very it was teaching me how to use external resources.
Yeah, yeah. They didn't tell you that working's not that fun. They just they just told you to work. What do you think are some of the key struggles or common struggles that parents have?
uh, uh, Truly, that our society is just not set up for two working parents. And that I we won't go all the way back, but really, from the Industrial Revolution, all of the changes that has happened over the years, and we don't have the support that a lot of other countries have, whether it be from a social aspect and kind of that it takes a village, multi-generational families living together, et cetera, or financial with support in even maternity, paternity leave, or affordable childcare. There's a lot in the system that's working against families. And what I think is interesting is uh, different generations will look at it differently. And I think we often get pegged as whiners, and well, we made it work, and why can't you make it work, kind of a thing. But what I find about the generation that's parenting now is that they're focusing a little bit less on, can we do it? Because yeah, you can do anything. You can do really crappy things, and they're thinking and they're asking, like, do we want to? Is this the way we want to do it? Is this the way we want to raise our kids? And I don't think it's ever. I think it's a different kind of thinking, and I'm stereotyping so many people and generations, but that is how I feel. I think our generation's kind of taking a step back and saying, whoa, 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 we just got on this train and we're barreling down this road and parenting and working and owning houses and doing all these things because we're told this is what we should do, but do we want to?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. What do you think can be done about that? Is a lot of it just kind of getting in line with some of the things that we're seeing in Europe as far as longer parental leave? I think that alone would make a big difference, and I think a lot of women are less likely to return to work, partially because they don't have as long of a leave, right? And maybe in Europe, you get like a year, right? Like,
Yeah.
so if we started to extend parental leave here, do you think that that would alleviate a lot of these challenges?
I don't know, Anthony. Like, I'm not sure what the solution is. I think it starts with um, maybe removing some of the stigma around people who choose to do things a little differently. I think I mean, we celebrate people. Your podcast, my podcast, we celebrate people for being successful in their careers and being able to do it all. And it's like, wow, way to go! You're doing awesome. And like maybe that's not always the route that we should be taking. Maybe we should be celebrating. And I think there is still a stigma around parents who decide to work in the home and raise their kids and not work, a career where they're bringing home a paycheck. And I don't think it is as celebrated as it should be. So I think just starting there and understanding people make money in all kinds of ways. And also tying into this is a lot of social media and comparison. I think it's easy to get on your phone and see what Sally is doing next door, and whether that be all of the things, she's cutting out little sandwiches in the shapes of animals for her kids' lunch, or
Yeah. Oh,
whatever
yeah.
it is. It's
No,
like
totally.
it's the comparison part is hard. What we celebrate, I think, makes it more difficult. So I don't know. I think our generation is doing a really good job of just having more conversations about it, and I think that's a start. But from a federal perspective, yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done. It's some of it maybe is a little counterintuitive to the United States and kind of the industrial nation that we a lot of people strive to be. So I don't know. I don't know what the balance is, but I think I would be happy in Europe if that's what if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think policies need to change, but I do agree. I think the comparison is a huge part of it, and there's just more of like a go getter culture here, and I think that probably doesn't help either.
Yeah, and one thing that one interview that I did on my podcast that did really well, and it was with what I would call a quote unquote expert, was it was college is not mandatory is the name of the podcast and the book by Stephanie Haynes, and um, it really talked about how not everyone is a good candidate for college, and that doesn't mean that they're not and they can't be successful. And I just found that really interesting because I think a lot of parents feel pressured to encourage and support their kids through college when maybe that's not the best path for them. And I think just being more open to different kinds of paths and different visions of success is helpful.
Yeah, I agree. On the flip side, is there anything you've noticed a commonality in your guests in parenting that that they're doing well, or that like the people you talk to that seem to like really have it together have something in common? Anything like that?
Oh, um, I think intention probably, and I hadn't thought about this ahead of time, but just intention. I think the parents who are doing really well in parenting and or career or whatever it may be really do things with intention, whatever it may be. So if they're um I don't know, as simple as spending time with their kids, maybe everyone's schedule is super super busy, but maybe they have an hour a day that they kind of carve out for their kids. They're doing that with a lot of intention. It's phones down, it's no screens, and getting on the floor and kind of playing with their kids. Or if they're focused on their career, whatever they're doing with a lot of intention, and they're not really riding the wave per se, but they're making sure that they're very thoughtful about how they spend their time.
I want to talk a little bit more about you as a working parent. So
Mhm.
you have a 9 to 5. I'm sure sometimes it's more like a 9 to 6 or 10 to 7. But do you work from home full time?
Um, I I am a remote worker. I was hired remotely. We do have a local office that I go into probably like once a week, but it's nothing mandatory.
Okay. And what about your husband?
My husband is in office every day in a city a couple towns over, and he was considered, I don't, what was the word during the pandemic? Remember, it was like crucial,
Oh yeah.
whatever. Um, whatever.
I forget. Yeah.
He's in the news industry, and so he was considered crucial throughout the entire pandemic. So he has always gone into the office.
Okay. Wow. So yeah. So you've been obviously defaulting to more of the responsibilities with the kids and with more flexibility. So tell me a little bit more about that. How do you juggle everything? Like, how do you find the time to make time for the family, make time for the career?
Uh, Not well, but we do our best. No, we've what we have found that works really well for us is uh, we're very orchestrated in the mornings. It's kind of the same routine every day. So I have never been a morning person my whole life, but I found that if I want any time to myself, I have to do it in the morning before everyone else gets up.
Yeah.
I don't get it otherwise.
Yeah.
So my days start at 5. I get up before everyone. I know. I'll do my workout or I'll work on my podcast or, whatever it may be. But like for that 5 to 6:15 is my time. 6:15, kids get up. I get them ready while my husband gets ready for work, showers. 7 o'clock, they're all out the door. So then I have 7 to 8 for me to get ready. And then, I work. And then my husband drops off the kids. I pick up the kids. And then we do, dinner, bedtime, whatever, all the evening things. I think one thing that's been really important to me, I started at my current company about 3 years ago. So my son was 2, 4 years ago. And I I was in a position where I felt pretty confident in setting some really clear boundaries during the interview stage. And that was things like, hey, 4:30 to 8. I mean, call me if it's an emergency, but
Yeah.
I'm not around.
Yeah.
Don't schedule meetings. Don't call me. Don't send me messages. That's my time for my kids. And I do have to travel for work, but I was, pretty upfront with kind of the frequency that I would be comfortable traveling. And we just set some parameters in place on the front end. And to be honest, my employer, I think, was a bit nervous about some of the requests I was making because it wasn't something that they were used to. In my role, you have to be pretty accessible to clients and employees. And it's not that I'm not accessible. Like if there's an emergency, um, an emergency, right? It's
Right.
relocation,
Yeah.
but
No one's dying. Yeah.
yeah. I can certainly jump on, or I have clients all over the world. So do I have to take, late night calls for, connect with people in Australia sometimes? Yes, of course. But for me, it's the planning purpose, because if I have a meeting that runs long and my husband has to pick up the kids now instead of me, he has to leave work at 3 p.m. in order to get to the kids on time before, the 5 o'clock pickup. And so it's not just impacting me, it's impacting our entire family structure.
Yeah.
So I set some really um, clear boundaries at the start of the employment. And then the other piece of it, along with the boundaries, is if I do have coworkers messaging me after hours on Teams or Skype or whatever it may be, I'll look at it. But if it's not something that needs a response that evening, I don't respond to it. And I was talking with my other colleagues, and she said, "Oh yeah, people just message me all night long, and I'm constantly on my phone." And I said, "Well, are you responding?" And she's like, yeah. And I said, well, you're making yourself available.
Yeah,
Like don't make yourself available. And if you can set those boundaries, and I know it can be hard, but I promise you, if you set boundaries and you stick to it, people will respect it.
I like that. I hear that a lot on my show as well. People that they want to just have this block from like 4 to 7 or something like that. That's family time, and then they're okay to log back in after if you need them, kind of at the end of the day or at the end of the night. Um, so obviously your employer hired you. You said they were a little bit worried, but did they was there a conversation around like, hey, we're hesitant, but we really like you, so we're going to honor this, but we need some flexibility from you, or how did they finally pull the trigger on you?
So I knew at the time that I was talking about.
I'm sorry. How did you know they were worried?
Yeah, yeah. So I knew at the time that I was interviewing, there was some concern because I was interviewing with the VP at the time, who said, "Okay, well, most of our employees are we're headquartered in California, which is a 2-hour time difference from where I'm at." And so they said, "Well, most of our employees are in California. So, I need to talk to the CEO to see how he feels about this. That would be 2:30 our time that, you're logging off and yada yada." Um, and I had done it in my past, so I knew it would be okay. And I knew that if it wasn't a good fit for them, like that wouldn't be the right company for me, right?
Yeah.
And so during the interview process, the VP had talked to the CEO, and then they had come back eventually, and among other things, and with an offer. But since then, my CEO has shared with me that he did have some concern, but one thing that he's learned throughout his career is that working parents, and particularly single moms, which I'm not, are the best time management
Yeah.
from an employment perspective. And he has seen how people who have those kind of deadlines and boundaries get the work done because they have to. They have to get the work done. So and he just was speaking with me about that the other day, about how, I think I just shared this with you, Anthony. I think I'd already talked about this with you. Um, but if anyone's not listening to Parently podcast, then now they're getting it on your
They better
podcast.
be, but
Yeah.
let's do it anyway.
He was just explaining how people who have those kind of other commitments in life are very focused on work, the time that they have to work, because they don't have time to dilly dally.
Totally. I mean, I've been talking about this a lot lately. I think that when you become a working parent, you get this like extra gear, and I think that you do become more productive because most people aren't just at a desk 9 to 5 just cranking away every minute, right? Like so I think that when you have things you have to do before work and you have to do after, you use up the time that you have. I think it's like Murphy's rule or something like that, or Parkinson's law, right? Where it's like you will do the work in the amount of time you have for it.
Yep, totally.
And I gotta say, I really respect that you like had the guts to just put those boundaries in an interview. I feel like a lot of people would be so afraid to not get the offer, so they wouldn't mention that. I mean, some people don't even don't want to tell them that they're pregnant, right? In an
Yeah.
interview and things like that. So like the fact that you were like, hey, like I'm doing this, like I really respect that, because I think a lot of people, and maybe myself included, would have maybe fished around for some clues that it'd be cool, but then just start hoping it's okay when you start doing it.
Well,
Um,
don't give me too much credit, Anthony. It was a unique situation where I had actually interviewed for a position like 6 months earlier, and they passed on me. And then another role opened up, and they came straight to me.
right.
So I knew I had an upper hand. I knew that they
Yeah.
wanted me. And so I do think, would I have
And you
been that?
weren't looking, right? You weren't looking. You were working. I mean,
No.
that's a huge part of it, right? Like
Yeah.
when you need a job, you're like, yeah, sure, forget my
Yeah.
kids, whatever. But
Hmm.
so that's true. But again, just because that's the case, I don't want to take away from what you did. I think that's impressive. Do you have any advice for anybody out there that's interviewing that wants to set boundaries? I mean, it sounds like you just kind of have to believe in yourself and do it, right?
Uh, yeah, I think, one thing that I talk to my friends a lot about is, are the seasons of life. And I think every every stage is kind of like a season of life, and it's okay to want different things in different seasons of life. And I think it's important just to kind of check in with yourself and understand what season you're in and what's important to you. Those conversations I had during that interview are not, they wouldn't even, I would have been way too freaked out to have that kind of conversation, 3 years earlier when I was pregnant or for the first time or whatever it may be. But I got to a point where I felt really strongly about what was important to me and what I wanted to prioritize. So I think just, really following your gut, touching base with yourself and understanding what's important to you. Maybe clocking out at 4:30 isn't important to you and you have some flexibility and your partner can pick up the night duty. There's what I do is different from what Anthony does, which is different from what someone else does. And that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And I think it's important to champion for yourself up front because yes, you might want the job and you might need the job, but if you're taking it under like when it's not aligned with you, eventually like the luster of the new job will fade and then you'll just have
It's
some
not going to
job.
work out. It's not going to
Yeah.
be a good fit for
You'll just
you
have
or
some
the
job you don't like.
employer. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Well, let's move into the final segment, Kelsey's advice corner. Okay. So I'm going to ask you for some advice on a few topics.
Oh my.
I
Like
love
who?
to see.
Like what qualifies me, Anthony? Like what are your You just let any Joe Schmo you pick up on the street give advice to your listeners?
You have a kid and you work. That's accurate. And you have you have some modicum of success. You have a
I've
career.
met the qualifications. Okay.
You have a house. You have a career. Or you're
Okay.
successful in some way. It's funny to hear people's reactions though, because a lot of people feel similarly to you when I say this.
That's funny.
But here we go. Okay, so what's your best piece of advice for working parents?
Uh um I would say my best piece of advice for working parents, and this isn't necessarily just for parents, but oftentimes how people treat you is or how they work with you is a reflection of themselves rather than you. And what I mean by that is, eh, let's say you have a boss who's like claiming who's claiming your work or whatever it may be. Maybe that boss is like actually really insecure and they don't really know what they're doing and they're just trying to, fake it. And so they're claiming your work as theirs to, gain some kind of validation. Um, but I think it can also apply to parenting as well. People who judge you for what you do maybe they're scared to do what they want to do, or maybe they're worried about how they're parenting. And so instead they look at other people and judge other people. So I think it applies in all different realms, but what people do and how they react is a reflection of them 99% of the time.
What advice do you have for someone that feels like they're not being a good parent?
Oh, that makes me sad. I think, if your kid is happy, your kid is clothed, your kid is fed, your kid has somewhere safe to sleep, you're doing a pretty good job parenting. My advice, I guess, would be stop the comparison. We talked about it previously, but it's really hard to feel like you're doing the best you can when you feel like you're doing minimal. But in reality, it's pretty extreme to be cutting your kids' lunches into dinosaurs. So
Yeah, I'm going to try not to do that for as long as possible. What advice do you have for someone that wants to start a podcast?
do it. Do it. And I just was talking to one of my neighbors the other day about this because he wanted to start a podcast. And I think back to what we just said, Anthony, people will say, and you'll either hear it directly, indirectly, or people will do it behind your back. But there's a million podcasts out there and you'll get another podcast kind of a thing. And that's okay. Let them, because if it's something that you want to do, I mean, it's number one, they're probably scared to chase their own passions and what they want to do. because they're afraid of being judged, because they judge other people. And so again, it's just a reflection of other people maybe being scared to do what they want to do. But number two, if it fulfills you, or maybe it brings you some kind of professional value, or in my case, it is rewarding, and it's my creative outlet. Um, do it. Who cares? Who cares? What if you, okay, so what if you do it for a couple of episodes and you decide you don't like it, and you stop? Who cares? Like, try it. No one would tell you, oh, don't go play tennis because everyone plays tennis.
Right. That's a good
Do
point.
it.
Yeah, that's true. What's the best advice you've ever received?
I'm going to butcher it, and I'm sure everyone's heard this a million different ways, but essentially, like, don't spend your time thinking about people who don't think about you. Meaning, that can apply to all different kinds of situations. From a work perspective, if you're up at night just thinking about a client or a presentation or whatever it may be, I'm pretty sure that client isn't like laying in bed thinking about you or thinking about your presentation. Or from a personal perspective, maybe it's a family member or a friend that you no longer see eye to eye to. From a parenting perspective, we had talked a lot about comparison, but do you think celebrities are sitting at home thinking about you and what you're doing and how beautiful your kitchen looks or your aesthetic or whatever? Like, just don't waste your valuable mind space on that.
I really like that. As somebody that does a lot of presentations and worries about them, I'm gonna take that one to heart.
All of a sudden, you start bombing all your
Yeah,
presentations.
right. I don't care. You're not thinking about me. Why am I gonna think about you? What advice would you give to your former self?
I think maybe stop trying to please everyone. I think that's there's a lot of people pleasers out there, and at one point in my life, I probably would have called myself a people pleaser. I'm more from a emotional perspective. I want everyone to feel comfortable and be happy. And the older I get, the more I realize that came from that comes with a sacrifice for maybe my discomfort or my happiness. And so it's really important for me personally to focus on myself more, and others a little less. That makes me sound quite selfish.
No, I think that's it goes back to the boundary setting, right?
Yeah.
All right, last question. By the time this episode comes out, my daughter will probably be about 19, maybe 20 months old. So what advice do you have for me as the father of a 19 to 20-month-old daughter?
Can I go back to stereotyping here, Anthony?
You can do whatever you want.
I have no idea what kind of a father you are, or your relationship with your spouse, but I would say my advice to you, in order to be a phenomenal father, is to continue to be a phenomenal husband. And so whether that is the date nights, whether that is taking more of the mental load, whether that is showing up for your wife in different ways, I think it really cannot be over exaggerated how important your relationship is, that foundation of marriage or partnership or whatever you may have, and how that impacts your parenting.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. Well, on that note, Kelsey, this has been a great conversation. Where can people go to connect with you, learn more about you, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would say just check out Parently would be the best. It's available wherever you get your podcast, Parent LY, Parently. I'm just wrapping up season 5. I'll be starting season 6 in 2025, and going to be shaking things up a little bit, doing some different things. So you might have to wait a couple of months to get that the beginning of that, but check out what I've got released so far.
Yeah, and check me out on that show as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Kelsey Higgins, ladies and gentlemen. Kelsey, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Anthony.